Welcome, everyone. And I want to say joy to the world and bold wishes for 2022. What a couple of years we've had with this brain health crisis with COVID. But many of us, as I've talked to you, we reflect on it, and some changes have happened that we reflect on what our priorities are. And for us, we have guided thousands of people now to figure out, how can I build a resilient brain? For those of you that are joining for the first time tonight, welcome. We're so glad you're here. And for those of you who have joined us repeatedly, you are our dearest friends, and we want all of you to be in that category for your curiosity and your support. My name is Dr. Sandy Bond Chapman. I am a distinguished professor, and I am the founder and chief director of the Center for Brain Health. For the last 3 decades, we have harnessed and understood this gift of neuroplasticity to see how can we really understand more about defining what is brain health. And I think Dr. Chopra would agree with this. We've gotten really good about defining what it isn't. Depression, stress, dementia, brain fog, anxiety. But what is it? What is it if we build capacity? That's what we're doing here. By being here tonight, you are part of our starting to spark this new revolution in brain health. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about what's going to go on tonight. First, we will introduce our speaker, and then there will be question and answer. I'll start asking him questions. And then I want you in your Q&A, not in the chat, but in the Q&A, you can type in your questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can. And then Dr. Chopra is going to do a special meditation. So don't leave us at 8 o'clock, or you will miss being able to kick off the best of the year with a meditation from Dr. Chopra. So this is a big night for us. So I hope you feel our excitement with, this is the first in our series, Brain Health Presents. That's a bold name, and you're going to see us bring to you the most exciting breakthroughs with people who are leading the way. And it couldn't be a more perfect kickoff than to have Dr. Chopra, who's a true visionary of personal transformation. I want to do a big-hearted thank you to our sponsor tonight, The Container Store. You're going to hear later from their CEO. They've been sponsoring us for 15 years. But when you meet Satish Malhotra, you will see we are meant to be together, because The Container Store is all about transforming our lives through organized minds. He said, your words of resilience, fortitude, clarity, resonate so much with what we're trying to achieve. And now I invited my very dear friend to introduce this evening's speaker, Sanjiv Das, who was the former CEO of Caliber Home Loans. He's a collaborator with us on this global brain health initiative of how can we build a brain healthy workplace and world. Sanjiv is wicked smart. He's got a generous heart. He's a visionary thinker, and he's a powerful connector. He is the reason that we have tonight with us Dr. Chopra. Sanjiv, please introduce our speaker.
Thank you so much, Sandy. I really appreciate it. Dr. Chopra, what an honor and a pleasure to have you. I first met you in 2018. You had just written your book, Home Where Everyone is Welcome, with Kabir. And you graced our home and many of our friends that evening, and I'm fond of that. 2018 was when I also, by chance, met Dr. Chapman at the Center for Brain Health. And as she said, there's some really awesome work that's going on at the Center for Brain Health. And as Dr. Chapman said, I am a humble banker. My claim to fame during the Citibank Vikram Pandit days was saving 2 million homes from getting foreclosed. And I remember when I described that narrative to you, you described me as a good, honest banker. And as you know, that's an oxymoron for most bankers, most people in my profession, but I won it as a badge of honor, and I am truly blessed to have met you. Dr. Chopra doesn't need an introduction. He is a world-renowned pioneer in integrative medicine and spiritual transformation. He is the founder of the Chopra Foundation, a nonprofit entity for research on well-being and humanitarianism, and Chopra Global, a modern-day health company at the intersection of science and spirituality. And that's what I love the most about what the Chopra Foundation, Chopra Global does. Time magazine has described Dr. Chopra as one of the top 100 heroes and icons of the century. He is the author of over 91 books, including numerous New York Times bestsellers. His next book, Abundance, The Inner Path to Wealth, unlocks how you can cultivate a sense of abundance in times of fear and insecurity. And that will be available on the 1st of March, 2022. I can't wait for that. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Deepak Chopra. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sanjeev. I remember that evening at your house. It was a magnificent evening. I met Dr. Ash Tiwari on that occasion, and we become very close friends. And I have an appointment at the Mount Sinai School of Medicine now, thanks to you. So thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Chapman, for inviting me and asking me to speak today on this very important topic of brain health, mental health, and the future of our well-being. So let me start off by saying that if in the last 10 years, there have been a few scientific revolutions, but most importantly in biology and in medicine, the three most important revolutions are: number one, understanding neuroplasticity; number two, understanding the human microbiome, which is 99% of the genetic information in our body, and how that is connected to our brain. So the mind, brain, gut axis is the second revolution. And the third is what we call epigenetics, which is not only looking at genes, but at the activity of the genes and how they are modulated by everything that we call experience. So let's start with the very simple idea of what the future of well-being appears to be. And I can say right from the start that the future of well-being is going to be personalized. It is going to be predictable. It's going to be process-oriented. It's going to be preventive. It's going to require your participation. But the most important thing to realize is that 95% of chronic illness and even 95% of what we call brain disease is modifiable by lifestyle. So right at the beginning, I'd like to say to you that only 5% of gene-related disease mutations are fully penetrant. Let me explain what that means. These days, everyone's familiar with the word mutation. COVID-19, we've had so many mutations, latest one being Omicron. So mutation is a variation on the normal sequence of nucleotides in a gene. Think of it as a spelling mistake or, a typo in how the gene is spelled out. So one of the words in the gene spelling out, there are 4 nucleotides, A, T, C, G, standing for 4 chemical bases, adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. And so these are known as the alphabet of life. And these structure genes which print out proteins. And that's how life begins. Proteins include things like enzymes and catalysts and many other things. So ultimately, every metabolite in our body is produced by our genes. Once in a while, there are mistakes. There are variations. The letter might be upside down, or it might be missing, or it may be in the wrong sequence. So that's called a mutation. And why am I mentioning this right now? It is now very apparent that less than 5% of these mutations are fully penetrant in that they predict the disease. So if somebody has a BRCA gene, for example, for breast cancer, they're going to get breast cancer. The poster child for that is Angelina Jolie, who had the BRCA gene. She had to have a preventive mastectomy because she would have otherwise 100% was guaranteed to get breast cancer. Now, that is true of less than 5% of all illness, not just cancer, but less than 5% of all illness. So when you look at, say, Alzheimer's disease, there are about 40 genes associated with genetic mutations associated with Alzheimer's disease, but only 3 of them are fully penetrant. The rest are modifiable. The risk is modifiable. This is true for cancer, heart disease, cardiovascular disease of all kinds, cerebrovascular accidents, metabolic syndrome, autoimmune disorders. I think I mentioned diabetes type 2. In other words, 95% of disease is modifiable by lifestyle. Here are the most important pillars of well-being, and not necessarily in sequence. And I'll start with all of them right now. So the number 1 pillar for well-being, including brain health, is sleep. We need, as adults, 7 to 8 hours of sleep. It doesn't matter what anyone says, but that's the minimal amount of sleep we need, of which 90 minutes should be deep sleep and 90 minutes should be dream sleep. During deep sleep, amyloid is flushed out from the brain. Think of the spaces between your neurons like streets in a big city. And at night, of course, in a big city like New York, you have people coming and cleaning up the streets and taking away the garbage. In our case, at night, when we go to sleep, the spaces between the neurons widen. So the streets themselves widen and amyloid is flushed out. Amyloid is the toxin that is associated with Alzheimer's disease. We now know that lack of sleep is a risk factor for amyloid, probably number 1 risk factor, not only for Alzheimer's disease, but lack of sleep is now being touted as the number 1 risk factor for premature death from cardiovascular illness, also for obesity, for dysbiosis, for hormone dysregulation, and metabolic syndrome, and many, many other conditions. So sleep, and we can answer questions on that later. Number 2 is stress management. And so during the pandemic, it became very clear that we have 2 aspects to our autonomic nervous system. So the autonomic nervous system is that part of your brain that functions automatically without your conscious control. And the autonomic nervous system has 2 branches or 2 divisions. One is called the sympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for what we call the fight or flight response. In a threatening situation, we fight or we run. And that fight-flight response is now referred to as the stress response. And it's due to sympathetic overdrive. When there's overactivity of the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system, you have increased adrenaline, cortisol. This weakens the immune system. There is inflammation in the body, which causes brain damage, which also causes dysbiosis, interferes with the self-regulation of both the human genome and also the microbiome, the second genome in our body, which is, as I said, 2 million genes as opposed to 25,000 human genes. And so when there is this sympathetic overdrive, it is also associated with anxiety, depression, frequently with mental aspects like not only anxiety and depression, but guilt, shame, and hostility, and the depletion of energy in the body. So sympathetic overdrive is responsible for more or less all the chronic illnesses of our society today. When we were looking at the pandemic, it was very obvious that those who were getting sick, the elderly, who already had a chronic illness, but also had sympathetic overdrive. And then there were young people who were getting sick and are getting sick with morbidity and mortality. They too have sympathetic overdrive and what are called cytokine or inflammatory storms. What became obvious to some of us, and biologists in particular, that there's another part of our nervous system, which is called the parasympathetic nervous system. And in that nervous system, the dominant nerve we have is the vagus nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve. And the vagus nerve, the word vagus is a Latin word, which means vagabond. It's the wandering nerve, and it travels into every part of our body. It influences our facial nerve, facial expressions. Are you sad? Are you happy? We have we have 43 facial muscles that express over 100 different emotions. And the vagus nerve can influence the facial nerve. And you can look at somebody and you say, oh, this person is sad, this person is frustrated, this person is feeling jealousy, this person is angry, this person is anxious. Facial recognition is already being employed as a technique to look at both sympathetic overdrive and what we call vagal activity. The vagus nerve also influences the tone of your voice. So if you're angry, you raise your voice, the tone changes. If you're in love, you speak softly. If you become love, you almost keep quiet. So every experience that we're experiencing is not only influencing our facial expressions, tone of voice, but also something called heart rate variability. When the sympathetic nervous system is activated, then heart rate becomes rigid and fast. On the other hand, when you have vagal activity, heart rate slows down and you have something called heart rate variability, which means your body is self-regulating. And then the vagus nerve also travels into the abdomen and causes self-regulation in every organ in our body, including the microbiome. And there's bidirectional traffic. So 80% of the serotonin that is produced in our body is actually produced from the gut. And so today we look at the gut as the second brain and the gut-brain axis as a unified activity. And when we stimulate the vagus nerve, either through meditation or mindfulness practices, or through self-inquiry, or through transcendence, or through mantra practice, or through emotional well-being, then you actually decrease inflammation in the body and you start to begin self-regulation and return to homeostasis. And therefore, the vagus nerve is now being considered the healing nerve of the body. And mind-body practices like yoga, like Tai Chi, like deep breathing, like controlled breathing, like singing, like chanting, like humming, and also changing your diet to a diet which has maximum diversity of plant-based foods. And if you eat meat, if it doesn't come from a factory but farm to table, that actually corrects the dysbiosis or inflammation in the gut, which leads to increased serotonin production. And in our research, we found that people who are getting sick with chronic illness or even acute illness, anxiety, depression, and inflammation precede almost every case of morbidity and mortality from not only COVID, but also associated with chronic illnesses. So the pillars of well-being become sleep, stress management, mind-body coordination, moderate degree of exercise, a plant-based diet with maximum diversity of plant-based foods, but also if, as I said, meat and fish are included or poultry, it's farm to table. So diet is effective. And then emotions. So when you feel disconnected from the world, when you feel fear, which is the anticipation of trauma in the future, or anger, which is the memory of trauma in the past, or hostility, the desire to get even, or when you blame yourself and you feel guilty and shameful and humiliated, then that causes inflammation and that causes brain disease, and also ultimately results in chronic illness. So emotions, emotional intelligence, which means the ability to get in touch with our own emotions, empathy, to be in touch with the emotions of another, compassion, the desire to alleviate suffering, and love in action, actually all transform sympathetic overdrive to what we call rest, rejuvenate, and repair, emotional resilience. Finally, there's also something called disruption of biological rhythms. So in our biology, we have 4 very fundamental rhythms. The first is the circadian rhythm, which occurs as the Earth spins on its own axis. And anyone who's experienced jet lag or worked a night shift will know what that does. It feels, you feel very disrupted. Appetite is disrupted, sleep is disturbed, there's fatigue, and there is hormonal imbalance. Circadian rhythms are also tied to seasonal rhythms and gravitational rhythms and lunar rhythms. So if you go out and walk barefoot on the ground or on the earth or on grass or touch a tree, then you're connecting directly to the earth. And the earth is a battery, just like your physical body is a battery. And 20 minutes of either forest bathing or touching a tree or using an electrical device to ground yourself can restore biological rhythms. These are the most important pillars of well-being. The 7th is what I call self-realization, or spiritual practice, including what is called metacognition. Metacognition is the ability to observe ourselves having a sensory experience. It's also the ability to observe ourselves while making a choice without judging ourselves. As we become aware of sensory experience, and these days this is called mindfulness, and as we engage in reflective inquiry on the nature of reality, and if we use any technique to go beyond what we call thought to the source of thought, then there is an amazing experience that allows you to have awareness not of mental activity or perceptual activity, but of the self. Self in spiritual traditions is referred to as the soul, but in cognitive science is referred to as the conscious agent prior to the conditioned mind. That is the value of meditation. That is the value of understanding how we can evoke what we call innate joy. And when we evoke innate joy or euphoria in our biological system, that also sets the stage for self-regulation. And that experience, which is called the spiritual experience, constitutes 3 elements. One is knowing your identity beyond space-time and causality. And number 2 is the emergence of Platonic values like truth, goodness, beauty, harmony, love, compassion, joy, equanimity. And the final component of that spiritual or religious experience is the loss of the fear of death. So when we combine all of these, you're looking at completely revisiting the understanding of the brain. The brain responds to every experience, whether it's mental or perceptual or emotional. We have 3 brains actually. One is the reptilian brain, fight flight response. The second is the emotional brain, which regulates our body as well. And the third is the cortical brain, where we do inquiry. And that's what gets activated when we practice mindfulness and meditation. And these activities now allow us to know which part of our brain we are using in any experience. Right now, for example, if you're listening to me, your frontal cortex is being activated. If you were having an emotional experience, your limbic brain would respond. If you were scared, your reptilian brain would respond. Knowing the areas of the brain that correspond to experience sets the stage for a revolution where we can reinvent our bodies, rewire our brains, and resurrect our souls to experience a more peaceful, joyful, sustainable life. Our collective dysfunction of the brain right now has produced a world which is unsustainable with climate change, which is socially and economically and racially unjust, where we see trauma and war and terrorism all over the world. But if we do pay attention to the fact that every experience, mental experience, is recorded in the brain, and every experience in the brain is recorded in the body, and the unified activity of mind, brain, perceptual activity, bodily experience, and the experience of the world all go together. And if we can harmonize this in an integrated manner and reach a critical mass of consciousness, with these ideas, we can hope to reach a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. The key is understanding that mind and brain go together, and they are unified activities and complementary activities of what we call awareness of consciousness, in which all experience is known, in which all experience is experienced, and out of which all experience is made. Our perceptual activities, our cognitive activities, insight, intuition, imagination, creativity, and transcendence. These are the opportunities we have once we understand how the brain works and how, through the techniques I've mentioned, we can rewire our brain for ultimately a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. This is a summary of the most important factors in brain health. And now I'd like to show some slides, because I did want to speak a little bit about what happens when we go beyond the conditioned mind. So you see three words here: meta-human. Meta-human is knowing yourself beyond your conditioned mind. Otherwise, we are all biological robots, constantly being triggered by people and circumstance into predictable outcomes. Meta-reality is not the mind, not the brain, but the source of the experience of mind, brain, and world in consciousness. And metaverse is the collective reality we can create if we wake up from the conditioned mind. Next slide, please. We have been doing some research on these ideas. If I can see the next slide. Here is some of the milestones that we see when people go beyond the robotic conditioning of the conditioned mind. There's a sense of shift, a sense of self, from me to we. There's a change in emotions from separation to empathy and compassion and joy and equanimity. There's a shift in cognition, in that the mind becomes clear and sharper. There's a shift in perception, in that it is in the present moment. A shift in memory, a sharper memory, but not being victimized by memory. There's deep insight into the nature of reality. There's intuition, which is a form of intelligence, which is contextual, relational, holistic, doesn't have a win-lose orientation. And intuition gives rise to vision, creativity, flow, ecstasy, transcendence, and ultimately a loss of the sense of personal agency, from me to we to us, to the oneness of reality, and ultimately even the loss of the fear of death. Next slide, please. We have been monitoring these milestones, and with this understanding, it's obvious that our consciousness is a field of infinite possibilities, infinite potential. It is abundant, and at every level of existence, from safety to security to sensuality to the generation of wealth to the power to transform, to understand that abundance is at many levels, including creative expression and higher vision, and ultimately to know ourselves as timeless beings having a time-bound experience is the gift of the human brain. Thank you very much. And I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Oops. Thank you. Oh my goodness, questions are pouring in, and how you're one of a kind. I think what a great privilege to have you here with us. One of the things that particularly comes to mind, Deepak, is how is it that we know this neuroplasticity and the gift that we have, and people can change their brain moment by moment in good ways, and yet much of the things we're doing, as you talked about, can be bad. To change it, why is it that we can't harness that we still only see the brain, what we say, that ride a boom after something happens? Like people just think, hey, brain, you're doing fine, until whoop, I'm so depressed, I can't remember anything, I've got brain fog, I can't sleep, and then they start worrying. How can we begin to help people embrace this amazing potential of the human mind?
So, Dr. Chapman, when I was in medical school, we were taught that the brain is not plastic, that neurons do not regenerate, that once you lose a connection between synapses, that's it. And the brain is basically a fixed organ. Now we know there's something called neurogenesis, and that we can actually generate new neurons, and synaptogenesis, new connections, by changing the quality of our experience. There's a lot of research now on something called happiness and the happiness formula, and I'd like to share it with you because a lot of researchers have done research on what makes some people happy and other people's not so happy and other people miserable. So happiness has three components to it. One is called the brain set point. The brain set point is determined for us in our childhood, in the first few years of life, by our caretakers. So if your parents or your caretakers were always looking at situations as a problem, if they were criticizing, condemning, playing the victim, and basically seeing everything as a problem, then you grow up to be an unhappy person. If your parents or caretakers were always looking for opportunities given the same situation, then you grow up to be a happier person. So that's the basic difference between happy people and unhappy people, is something called the brain set point. Now, on the first time you hear about this, you say that's bad news because I had nothing to do with it. It was my childhood. It was my upbringing. That's partly true. And 50% of our daily happiness experience is in fact determined by the brain set point. But now we know that when we practice mindfulness, when we practice meditation, when we practice conscious choice making, and when we actually question our limiting beliefs, is this true? If somebody believes I'm too fat, I can never lose weight. Is this true? I'm 100% sure if it's true. Why do I hold this idea to be true? What is the opposite of this? So this is now becoming reflective inquiry, which is also part of meditation process. And I can take us through that in a moment. That will change the brain set point. 50% of our daily happiness experience is just the brain set point. The second is conditions of living. So if somebody wins the lottery, they'll be ecstatic in the beginning, but in 6 months, they return to their brain set point. And in 1 year, it's now known they are more unhappy than they were before they won the lottery, because now money becomes their identity and they confuse net worth with self-worth. The last component is the daily choices we make. So we make two kinds of choices every day. One are for pleasure, like people go have alcohol, they take drugs, or they eat, or they have sexual experience, entertainment. These choices for personal pleasure do make us happy, but only for a short time, like 24 hours, 48 hours. And then we have to repeat that choice. And if you have an addictive personality, it leads to addiction. There are other choices we make, which are called for choices for fulfillment, meaning, purpose, or making another person happy by giving them attention, affection, appreciation, and acceptance. You can make another person instantly happy. They get a dopamine hit and you get a serotonin hit at the same time. So we can change our brain totally. And this involves gene expression, epigenetics, many things that we didn't know before. But this is a wonderful time to actually reverse engineer the traumatized brain. Basically.
It really is. It's a cause whose time has come because everyone's been affected. And we now in the Brain Health Project are enrolling 120,000 people. And Deepak, you would love this. I asked people, when do you think your peak brain year is, was, or will be? And what I want people to say is tomorrow.
Now.
Tomorrow. Every day can be better than it is. One of the questions that was asked here is, can we overcome these effects of stress no matter what age?
Sandra, I'm losing your voice. Is not coming through clearly. Can you repeat the question?
My question is, can we overcome brain loss at any age?
Okay. Yes, we can recoup memory loss at any age through various kinds of therapies, including self-reflection, reflective inquiry, and through mental games that involve memory retrieval. Now, this is a very interesting question because people still don't know where memory is in the brain. There are associated areas with memory, but where is memory stored until we retrieve it? That's called the hard problem of consciousness. And we now know that memory is in consciousness. It's only retrieved through the brain. So once we do that, if we can go to the source of thought through meditative practices, we can retrieve lost memories. It's not a good idea to retrieve every memory because there are traumatic memories also. And if you remembered everything that you experienced, in fact, that would be, again, overload. Earlier, you showed a slide that, or you were showing in the video that multitasking is impossible, if not traumatic, it's also impossible. So too, to have memory, there's a phrase in wisdom traditions, I use memories, but I do not allow memories to use me. So most people are victimized by traumatic memories. And in that case, it's better to transcend those traumatic memories through meditation. Could you hear me clearly? Can you hear me clearly? Because Sandra, you're not coming through too clearly.
Hi, Dr. Chopra. I'm going to ask you some questions, if that's all right, from the audience.
Yes, please do.
Hi. So one of the questions is, this is from Ani. How important is finding meaning and purpose in life to being able to relieve stress?
It's probably the most important thing we can do to relieve stress. When you have meaning and purpose in life, that state is called fulfillment. And fulfillment brings you permanent joy and happiness. And that is much more important than pleasure. So meaning, purpose. We are biologically driven by purpose. And those people who have meaning and purpose in their life, no matter how old they are, they will live longer and their brain will be healthier.
So to tap onto that, Bonnie was asking a question about the difference between happiness and joy.
Yeah, very good. So this is a very good question. Happiness is always for a reason. And it is also in contrast to sadness. So if I asked you to close your eyes just now and do nothing, in a few moments, you would be aware of your internal dialogue. And that's you having a conversation with them yourself. If that conversation is a happy memory, you will feel joyful in the body. If that is a traumatic memory, you will feel sadness. So happiness and sadness go together. You can't have one without the other, just like pleasure and pain, up and down, hot and cold, etc. Joy, on the other hand, is our intrinsic state as babies. You watch a baby, unless the baby is wet or hungry, it's joyful. The other day I was in a train, in the subway, and I was looking at a harassed mother. She had a pram and she was on the phone and she was multitasking, but the baby was in the pram and it was trying to catch my eyes. And the moment I caught, our eyes locked in, it bubbled with joy. So joy is a natural, fundamental state of being, whereas happiness is a mental state. Anytime we go to the source of thought, we experience joy.
Fabulous. Somebody asked, let me see here. I love this. Benny asked this question. For somebody who's just getting started, what's the first step in awareness?
Stop and ask yourself, am I aware? And immediately you will be aware. Okay? Or stop, and I use something called the STOP formula. STOP. S stands for stop. T, take three deep breaths and smile from your head to your toes. O, observe the sensations in your body. And P, proceed with compassion and awareness. STOP. But we'll do a meditation which will go deeper.
Fabulous. I like this question also. Sarah is asking, how can we bring some of these amazing concepts to our work environments, particularly when we're often in these very hyper-competitive conditions?
Right now, there's a big trend in organizations to look at health and well-being in several buckets. So there's career well-being, there's social emotional well-being, there's physical well-being, there's community well-being, and there's financial well-being, and ultimately, of course, emotional and spiritual well-being. All these buckets of well-being are very entangled with each other. So if I ask somebody a very simple question, on a scale of 1 to 10, can you tell me the quality of your life? And if they say 1, then that's the life sucks. If they say 10, it couldn't be better. But this intuitive answer, if you say 8, 9, or 10, your life, you're probably thriving. If you say 6 or 7, you're struggling in some area like sleep or maybe emotional discord with your partner or something like that, or a bad diet or lack of exercise. And if you score less than 5, then you're suffering, you probably have a disease. So we need to understand that right now there's a big movement in the business world which understands that if employees are stressed and not happy, then customers won't be happy. If customers are not happy, then investors won't be happy. And investors are not happy, that's a lousy business. So we need to incorporate these buckets of well-being in our businesses. And it's being done. I consult with lots of businesses where we're creating environments for people to be mindful, aware, and renew with short breaks through the day for self-awareness.
Wonderful. Another question I think is so interesting. Nina was asking, when did humankind get so off balance? And why do we think that this is normal?
Humankind got off balance with the invention of the light bulb. Before that, well, like every other biological species, we went with the flow and the rhythms of not only the seasons, but the circadian rhythms. But as we developed technology, it gave us the option to actually go against the laws of nature, and our own biological rhythms got disrupted. And then as technology expanded, it gave us the illusion of multitasking. Actually, there's no such thing as multitasking. When you do multitask, you switch from one thing to another. And now and you don't do anything properly, and multitasking actually causes inflammation in the brain and causes brain damage and is addictive, like cocaine is addictive. So multitasking and trying to do too many things, and with this whole electronics revolution, the ability to give us the illusion that we can do too many things that actually work is the most important thing, rather than a joyful, energetic body or a loving, compassionate heart or a clear mind or lightness of being. We thought the purpose of existence is work, and it isn't.
Wonderful.
Is my microphone working better?
Yes, now it is.
Yes, now it is. Thank you.
Oh, good. Okay. So, Jen, you can stay on because I like us interacting together. But then how do you work and write so many books? How do you keep calm when you're, really trying to energize these thoughts? What brings you to be able to thrive? And then I also want to ask you, if you think about a stressful situation, how is it that you can deal with that in the minute to really kind of make your brain optimize its function during stress too? So being so productive, but then also in stress. I'm curious about you personally.
Okay. For me, I don't get stressed, period. I don't remember the last time I got stressed. I think it's the worst use of imagination is stress, and the best use of imagination is creativity. That's it. So I always
you're our partner. That's exactly what we say. We call it possibility thinking. Correct. I knew I would love you.
Yes. So stress is an imagination. It's either regretting the past or imagining a future that's not here. So what's the point? And no situation ever helped by anxiety. So you can always ask yourself, what is the creative opportunity? Or you can just, what I ask people, try this right now. Close your eyes and ask yourself, I wonder what my next thought is going to be. Mm. And your mind will go silent. When you wait for a thought, it doesn't come. Because the awareness of a thought is not a thought. And just that is enough to recognize that you don't need stress. You need awareness. The awareness of a thought is not a thought. The awareness of an experience is not an experience. It is free, automatically.
Brilliant. One of the questions we got early on is, how can we address low-income health inequality in wellness?
Well, we are trying to address it through our foundation. We have a program now called Never Alone, and it's online, neveralone.love. And we even have emotional AI chatbots to help people with depression. Our emotional chatbot, which is named Peewee, she's had 11 million conversations, de-escalated 5,000 suicide attempts, and we are now trying to engage cryptocurrency and the metaverse in democratizing well-being throughout the world, particularly mental well-being, through the 4 A's: attention, affection, appreciation, and acceptance, creating a global network of caring. And if that movement takes off, then we'll see that we're always in this together. When we have shared vision, when we complement each other's strengths, when we have maximum diversity of opinion, but also of education. So it's not just brain scientists and humanitarians, but it's everyone, storytellers, songwriters, poets. When they all come together, we can create an ecosystem of joy. And joy should be the only purpose of life. Joy should be the most important measure of success and health. That's our motto.
I couldn't agree more. One of the things that we tell people, you'll appreciate this, is when they say, should I be doing Sudoku or crossword puzzles? And I say, no, you should be doing an act of compassion to someone that you may feel a little angry with or agitated with, because it's the most complex that task you can take on, and it also brings you the best joy and gives them joy and changes your brain.
Chapin, we also did an exercise with heart failure patients where we asked them to keep a gratitude journal. All they had to do at the end of the day is write the question, what am I grateful for? And write down whatever came to their mind. Inflammatory markers went down, and these patients with heart failure did much better than the control subjects who were just taking medication. And we could see gene expression change just through the experience of gratitude.
I couldn't agree more. And why you're a doctor. Why have we medicalized brain health and medicalized it so that even when people say brain health, they're really talking about sick brain, not brain health and building capacity? How do we transform a whole system that for generations that we're still stuck in this medicalizing it and silos of diagnosing it, but not looking at the infinite potential?
I think we have to take the medical model totally out, because it's only concerned with disease. It is not concerned with how do we experience a joyful, energetic body, or a loving, compassionate heart, or a clear mind, or creativity, or transcendence. And that's the value of these conversations. These conversations actually increase awareness globally. And the more we have these conversations, the more awareness we have, the medical profession will follow. They always follow the latest trend, which is never started by the medical establishment to begin with.
It's so true. When people say, what is your greatest hurdle? It's often, how do we get physicians to realize that 80% more can be done in health than after something happens? So that's why you need to be part of us, and we need to be part of you to spark this revolution to really change. We can,
because what we call the internet now, that's our global brain, right? And it's very dysfunctional at the moment, but we can fix it, because the internet is our neural network for the global mind right now.
Yeah,
and we can use it to good purpose. And that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah. Well, it would be fun to work with you. And one of the ways that we're measuring brain health, most people, it's still kind of, this vagueness that people can't put their arms around. So we, over the last 3 decades, have developed based on 22 kind of gold standard measures. And what we found were that 3 factors evolved when we see people flourish. One of them is clarity of thinking. And in clarity of thinking is this imagination, possibility thinking, deeper level thinking. And when we see clarity improve, we see sleep improve. That goes along with this factor, as well as compassion. Because when people have clarity, they can begin to be open. The other factor is resilience. And we measure that with looking at the human-to-human connection that you talk so much about, and having purpose in life, which when you were talking about faith. And then the third factor is fortitude, which is sort of this emotional balance and happiness that fits in. And so people across, as things go wrong, they can flourish and make their brain health holistic index better for all different reasons. When sleep gets out of whack, sometimes you can rely on resilience to continue to thrive. What do you think about this?
The very fact that we can change our brain and neural networks by changing our patterns of thinking, feeling, even speaking and behavior, we can, as I said, rewire the brain.
Yeah, and measure it. And we're looking at the neural markers of as we improve in people, and we've shown people in their 20s, 40s, and 80s improve equally when they embrace this.
Right. Actually,
so it's exciting.
There's no time where you can't rewire the brain.
No. Satish, I want Satish to come on, because there's some things on here on clutter, and I would love for him to ask our question, and then if there's time, we'll have another one. But Satish, please, the Container Store, to ask a question.
Thank you so much, Sandy and Dr. Chopra. Oh my gosh, you gave us so many great gifts today and wisdom, including your 7 pillars for well-being, things that any of us can action right away. We at the Container Store are just obviously very thrilled to be able to sponsor tonight's event. We have a great long-standing partnership with the Center of Brain Health, and just love the work that Dr. Sandy Chapman is doing here with her team to advance brain health. And, as we kind of spoke a little bit earlier today, before we started, at the Container Store, we're really focused and rally around a singular purpose, and that is to transform lives through the power of organization. And it's so great to see the Center of Brain Health and the Container Store, and obviously all the great work that you're doing and working so tirelessly to really help transform lives. So my question for you, sir, is, what impact do you think a person's physical space, specifically if it's organized or disorganized, have on them to be able to achieve well-being goals?
The physical space is your extended body. So if the physical space is disorganized, your body will feel that as well. And the more you can create a space, and this is a new trend right now in physical spaces, the more you can create space where space itself becomes part of the experience. Right? If I ask people right now, look around you, what do you see? They'll only talk about objects. They never talk about the space itself. The space is the non-changing factor in every other changing experience. And if you can create a space that gives us the feeling of joy, spaciousness, colors, sound frequencies, tastes and smells that actually feed the five senses through pleasurable experiences and joyful experiences, then that space becomes your extended body, and that heals.
That's outstanding. Thank you so much for answering our questions
today. Can I just add one question to that? Because it builds on what you just said, Satish, and then he can turn it over. How does clutter, then, we think about what the Container Store is, kind of make sure that our environments are organized. Eduardo asked about how clutter affects the brain, and then we'll turn it back to you, Satish.
Cluttered environment, cluttered brain, cluttered mind.
That's why we're so focused at the Container Store to help declutter, to help de-stress, yes. Because it absolutely has a significant impact, whether you realize it or not. And from my own personal experience, once I've decluttered, it has had a transformable impact on myself to be organized. And so probably a great segue then as well, Doctor, to hand it back to you for our meditation practice.
Okay, so wherever you are, ladies and gentlemen, sit quietly with your feet firmly planted in the ground. Close your eyes. Keep your hands open on your lap and just observe your breath right now. And as you observe your breath, just mentally remind yourself, I'm present in every breath I take. I'm present in every breath I take. Now bring your awareness to sound, including the sound of my voice or any other sound that you might be hearing in your environment. Just remind yourself, I'm present in every sound I hear. Now, just be aware of your skin touching your clothes, or touch one hand with the other, or touch your clothes with your hand. And mentally remind yourself, I'm present in everything I touch. Now, generate some saliva in your mouth. Taste it. Taste the back of your teeth, the roof of your mouth. Remind yourself, I'm present in everything I taste. Bring your awareness now to your nostrils. Remind yourself, I'm present in everything I smell. Now let's generate some images, imagination. So imagine a rainbow. Imagine snow-clad mountains. Imagine a beautiful sunset on the ocean. Imagine a green meadow. As you generate any image that you want, remind yourself, I am present in everything I imagine. Let's go a little deeper. Let's evoke an emotion. So let's think of someone that you love. Think of someone that you deeply love. Bring their awareness into your heart or in your imagination. And as you feel the emotion, remind yourself, I am present in every generation of emotion I create. I am present in every emotion I generate. Finally, ask yourself, I wonder what my next thought is going to be, and observe it as it comes like a cloud across the screen of consciousness, and then it drifts away. And just remind yourself, I'm present in every thought that floats by on the screen of my consciousness. And finally, extend your awareness beyond the boundaries of your skin, across the fabric of space and time. And remind yourself, I'm present in every experience that is possible across the space, across the fabric of space and time. And now finally, as we go a little deeper, start to repeat your full name to yourself. I am Satish Malhotra. I am Deepak Chopra. I am Jeremy Gray. I am Sandra Chapman. Even as you repeat your name mentally, realize you're repeating your name. That's not who you are. So drop your name right now and just repeat the words, I am, with no name, no form attached to it. I am. I am. I am. And now mentally replace that with the mantra, aham, aham, which is the vibration of I am. Aham. Aham. Let's do that for at least 30 seconds. And of course, thoughts will come. Just go back to the sound. Aham, aham. Now finally, let the mantra go and just be aware of your own presence. Be aware of being aware. That's our fundamental state of being. No form, no memory, no regrets, just the state of being. Rest in being. Rest in your own presence. And before we come out, let's introduce some intentions. So feel your body from the inside out and mentally repeat to yourself, joyful, energetic body. Joyful, energetic body. Now bring your awareness to your heart and mentally repeat, loving, compassionate heart. Bring awareness to your third eye between your eyebrows and the intention, reflective, clear mind. And finally, move your awareness beyond the boundaries of your skin, pervading all of space-time, and the intention, lightness of being, lightness of spirit, lightness of soul. Take a few seconds, feel your body again, and then gently open your eyes. I hope you enjoyed that.
Dr. Chopra, what a gift you have been to thousands of people. We cannot thank you enough for being here. Abundance. Your book, Abundance, Everyone must get it to understand how we can bring abundance to the world, where every single human counts with abundance. I'm just so grateful for tonight. I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for the thousands of people that wanted to see you. And I hope we empowered them to become architects of their own brain and take this power that they have and this calmness. And I love the idea that you said you never feel a moment of stress. What a gift, every single moment. And we will hold this night in our hearts and in our memories and in our souls. And I'm grateful to the Container Store. Thank you, Container Store. And really, we are a nonprofit, and the people on this call, your support makes our work possible. I can hardly wait to host you, Dr. Chopra. So promise me that you will bring this practice to Dallas.
I will. And let's collaborate on some research as well.
Let's do. What a gift. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chaplin. Thank you. Thank you, Sanjeev.
Dr. Chopra, appreciate it.
Thank you very much.